Mayoral candidate Amy Demboski, thank you for joining us today.
Well, good morning.
Yeah. You've been in Alaska since you were 12 years old, and
Yeah.
you've been here ever since.
I have. I moved to Alaska. My dad was military, so we moved to Alaska when I was 12, and I graduated from Chugiak High School, married here, had my children here, and my husband's a Chugiak graduate. My daughter graduated from Chugiak last year, and now she's a freshman at UAA, and I have a freshman at Chugiak High School still, my son.
Would you say your family is a big support behind your run? Are they your biggest support?
I would absolutely say my family is my foundation, and you know, it was through the decisions of our family that we decided that this is time that the city of Anchorage gets a choice, and a conservative choice. That's why we decided to run.
Continue on then on that line. Why did you run for mayor?
Well, when I looked at the field, I realized, you know, as a conservative voter, as somebody who really believes in public service, who wants to represent everyone, I didn't feel there was anybody in the race that I could support, and I felt voters really deserved, you know, a clean choice. They deserved a conservative choice, and so I made the decision after a lot of prodding. There were a lot of people that had been asking me to run, and it took me a long time to say yes, but ultimately what it came down to is I truly believe the city of Anchorage is worth it. We deserve a clear choice, and I think by me entering the race, they definitely have that.
You're on the Assembly, and is this something that you've been thinking about for a long time in terms of running for mayor? Has it been in your mind?
No,
okay.
Not at all, actually.
Was there a defining moment then that, I mean, you said that there wouldn't be somebody that you would vote for, but surely you would have thought about it before. I mean, the full field of candidates wasn't even out yet. You were one of the first to, if not the first.
Oh no, I definitely wasn't.
One of the first to declare.
I was going to say there was a couple candidates that were in the race probably a year before I was. Okay. But what it came down to is, for about a year, I had been trying to solicit other people to run, and over the summer, I would say late summer of last year, 2014, I had been approached by numerous members of the community. Some from South Anchorage, some from Eagle River, that had really wanted a clear conservative choice. They wanted a voice in the race that represented taxpayers. And so I would say I really made my decision in August, but because of the Senate race, which kind of sucked all the air out of the room, I really didn't start campaigning until November after that race was over. But to me, it was not something I was planning. But it was something that I seriously considered before I made the decision. It's a big commitment, not only for you as a candidate, but for your family.
Right. You say that you're the conservative vote, so let's explore some of the reasons why behind some of your thoughts. And I want to talk about economics, and the state is facing an uncertain future in terms of its budget. Are you concerned about Anchorage and how Anchorage will deal with an economic hit?
Well, definitely. One of the first things we go to is revenue sharing, right? The state says that potentially revenue sharing will be on the decline, which means to the city of Anchorage we could be losing between $10 and $12 million in revenue. You know, that's a concern. Is it insurmountable? Absolutely not. We can deal with that. But I'm really running because I believe in the limited role of government. I believe government exists to protect, you know, we have to do public safety. We have to do infrastructure right. We have to provide educational opportunities for our kids. But we also have to have a strong fiscal foundation in order to do those things. My background is in business development and management. It's in the healthcare sector, but nonetheless, I hold an MBA in finance, and I've been very involved. Even before I was on the Assembly, I was the chair of the Budget Advisory Commission for the city. So I understand government, I understand accounting, I understand budgets. But to me, the fiscal aspect is really the foundation of everything we do, because if we don't have good fiscal policy, we can't do the essential services that the government should do.
Have you thought about how you would handle a shortfall, say if the revenue sharing did decline or was eliminated? I mean, I don't know if that is a possibility, but if it was pulled back, I mean, how would you fill that gap in Anchorage?
Well, you know, this is an interesting question, because often people say, well, if you lose the revenue here, you're going to have to make it up somewhere. What we know, revenue sharing probably will decrease by about 50% is what I'm anticipating, maybe $4 to $5 million this year. But what I also know is when we look at the budget, we probably are going to have a surplus this year. And you look at what we transferred to ASD last year, and they had almost a $17 million surplus. So it's not that the government can't live within its means. It's just every time they start to lose from one pot of money, instead of stepping back and looking at the whole picture, they try to take more. And I think that's I don't think that's a good way to operate, honestly. I think you have to evaluate what you're supposed to be delivering and how efficiently you're delivering it. And sometimes you do have to cut some things. You have to streamline services. But I'm not going to immediately go to the taxpayers and say you have to spend more, because I don't think it's necessary at this point.
Would you consider making cuts anywhere, and could you be specific in terms of areas that you're concerned about?
Sure. Well, I'll be quite frank. The number one priority is APD staffing and deployment of those resources, and also the fire department. I mean, you have to do public safety first. You have to do it right.
But you wouldn't make cuts?
No,
I
not to public safety.
Where cuts?
So my point is, when you start having this discussion, you have to start and say, what are your priorities? So my priorities are public safety, infrastructure, education. Then you look to all the other ancillary items that you do, whether it's parks, whether it's different services within transportation, whether it's different services, grants that are issued through the Department of Health and Human Services. So that's why you have to have a strong foundation on what your priorities are. That's why I always talk about public safety. I always talk about infrastructure and education, because that's what government should be doing first.
You mentioned tax, just you threw it out there a minute ago. You wouldn't be considering any other types of tax then for the city?
That's right.
Okay. You're happy with the property tax being the only, you don't think we need a
I'm not happy with property taxpayers bearing the burden of it all, but the fact of the matter is, you know, what I know about government, when you open Pandora's box, they keep coming back time and time again. So am I proposing a sales tax? No. But if a sales tax is being proposed, because I think that's where you're going, if a sales tax is being proposed, three things have to happen. Number one, it has to pass by 60% of the voters. Number two, it has to be kept under the tax cap. And number three, you know, when we look at this, it has to be something that offsets property taxes dollar for dollar. It just has to, because right now the property taxpayers are bearing the brunt of the load, quite frankly. But am I proposing a new tax? No, absolutely not. Because I truly think government can live within its means. It just takes leadership to get us there.
You brought up public safety, and that's something that you've been talking about since you started running for mayor during your campaign, and it's a important point for you. Can you tell me about what changes are needed within APD, if any, to address some of the public safety concerns that the city has at the moment?
Sure, and I'll go back to say, you know, public safety isn't something I've been talking about since I've been running for mayor. It's something that I've been actively engaging and improving since I've been on the assembly. And it started with the fire department, yes, and it started with community service patrol. What we know is the way the city had been deploying its resources were ineffective. So with community service patrol, for example, we had firemen on 4-man engine rigs that were responding to man-down calls, essentially inebriates, and they were sitting there, 4 guys with a fire truck for over an hour waiting for a transport. That's an expensive resource. So you know, I propose legislation to bolster the community service patrol. Why? Because it's cheaper. For over $300 for a fire truck versus $32.50 for a community service van. That's a better use of taxpayers' money. But it also freed up public safety, not just AFD, but APD, because we were having APD transport all of these inebriates. So to me, it's about taking a holistic approach. But when we look at APD, what do we know? We know the gang unit, the theft unit, the traffic unit, sexual assault unit. All these different specialties have been absorbed into patrol. Why? Because they're short-staffed. And it's a symptom of what we see in their overtime budget. When their overtime budget is really high, it's a symptom of not having enough staff. And does it mean you have to hire 500 new police officers? No, absolutely not. But you have to have enough in order to do the basics.
I understand that the pool of applicants that apply to become a police officer here in Anchorage has shrunk over a number of years now, so they just don't have the people to choose from to become a new police officer. Is that something?
Well, that's arguable. You know, quite frankly, when you're hiring 25 police officers and you have over 800 applicants, I would say there's a pretty good pool there. Is the selection process extremely selective? Yes, it is. Is that a good thing? Yes, it is. But if we make a commitment, you know, one of the things that has to change is the morale within our workforce. It has to. Morale is directly linked to productivity. So once the staff recognizes not only they're supported, but they're included in the process, we will start to change that paradigm. And I think that will help not only hire new people, but it'll help retain some of our older officers until we can transition. So what we're seeing now with some of the short staffing of APD specifically is some of the contracts that were negotiated in the late 2008, 2009 timeframe. There was a cash bonus, an incentive in order for them to retire early. So a lot of those officers are exercising that option right now. So yeah, we are hit with kind of multiple things, and there are other communities across the country that have more of an incentive package that are luring some of our officers away. But one of the ways that you get people to stay in Alaska is you hire Alaskans. It's really difficult to hire from outside. What we're seeing, whether it's the police department or the fire department, there are some that we hire, they don't even move their families up here. So we become a training ground and then they move away. So, do
you have a solution for that particular problem?
Well, yeah, we have to bolster our internal hiring within the state of Alaska. I don't mind soliciting whether it's state troopers or officers from Palmer or wherever else they are within the state, but hire Alaskans first. And I think that issue will go away. APD, AFD, they are some of the best trained forces we have in the state of Alaska. And they are incredibly professional. I've watched these men and women in action, and I can tell you they're very proud of the job they do, and they should be, because they're very good at it. So, it's a holistic approach. You can't say one thing is the thing that's going to fix retention, or one thing is going to be the thing that fixes hiring people. But I can tell you, money isn't the only thing. These men and women are paid well for the job they do, and they deserve it. But what it comes down to is you have to have leadership that is absolutely puts public safety before all else, because that's what government should do first.
Affordable housing is another issue that's been brought up recently, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Is there ways that you're looking at to make more land, say, available in Anchorage for building, and how can we just decrease the rental and house costs?
Well, there's a lot of issues. So we look at Anchorage and we see the mountains on one side and the inlet on the other. We don't have a lot of available buildable land. Now, is there some land that's held by the municipality or the federal government that should be put into private sector hands? I think so. But, beyond that, it's not just about the land. Right now, Title 21 is so bureaucratic, it is so stringent, it is truly prohibitive for a lot of these builders to build economically in Anchorage. I had a gentleman when I was running for assembly a couple years ago. He was going to build a parts store, and he ended up building in the valley. Why? Because he couldn't. It was too expensive to build in Eagle River. So when you have builders who literally their projects are being held out because they can't get through the permitting department or the planning department at the municipality of Anchorage, we have to look internally and say, are we putting too many roadblocks in the way for the private sector to do their job? And I think the answer is yes.
As mayor, how much swing will you have in terms of acquiring more land, say from the federal government or that's owed to Anchorage by the state? Is that something that you can do?
Well, sure you can. And we've seen Mayor Sullivan doing it right now. He has been actively pursuing some federal lands, and we're on the verge of getting those back. So absolutely you can have sway, but I still say when we look at the issue with housing in Anchorage, it's not only available land, but it's the bureaucratic system of Title 21 and the departments within our own city government.
Amy, do you have any other visions that you want to share with us about how you see Anchorage moving during your term as mayor if you're elected?
Well, I think you're going to see somebody who gets back to the basics. You're going to see someone who is honest and open and transparent and someone who says to people, what is your concern? I'm not going to have a closed door. I want to engage everyone, because that's how we learn, that's how we grow, and when we collaborate, that's how we get things done. Are we going to agree on everything? Absolutely not. But what you will see, I'm going to make it, the government is going to be put in a position where they're there to serve the people. They're not going to be there to be a blockade to free market enterprise. They're not there to be a blockade. I go back to, I had a gentleman who was trying to build a porch at his house. And he said the permitting process was so rigorous, the labor and materials were we're cheaper than the actual permit for the city of Anchorage. How does that serve people? So you're going to see a person, and you're going to see leadership that actually puts people first. You're going to see people who are engaged. You know, I have no interest in sitting on the 8th floor in an office with my door closed. I will be down among the people, and so will every department director. So this is going to be a total change of leadership. It's going to be someone who is there for service and recognize that we're there to help the people.
Speaking of leadership, just a final question I'm throwing out to all candidates. Have you considered who you would hire on as city manager? It's a very important position, and if you've thought about it, can you share it?
Well, I absolutely have thought about it, and I know exactly who I think would be a great person. But no, I don't make political promises. I just don't. You know, I think what I will do is I've thought about who's going to be on the transition team. There have been a few individuals that I've asked, but our mission is to find the best people that absolutely understand the vision of Anchorage, and that is service before self. That is putting the people first, and we will find the best qualified, but I can promise you there are not going to be any political favors that I pay. It's just not going to happen.
Mayoral candidate Amy Demboski, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.